All right, guys. Hopefully you've all gotten food. So I asked you multiple times. My name is Chris Messina. I am the developer experience lead at Uber. I've been there for 2 months. Unfortunately, Jonathan is going to be asking me some questions about Uber, which I may or may not be able to answer. Just kidding. Anyways, you're going to sit? Yeah, please. Please sit, please. Be comfortable. The idea and the inspiration for this event sort of came out of my own, I guess, interest in platforms. The fact that I work at a company and I work on platforms now is sort of coincidental. Not at all. And observing things that are going on in the environment, in the landscape. The thing that's been very interesting to me, observing where we've come from, is that the computing paradigm and environment that we live in today, that we inhabit, actually was sort of created and set in the 60s. If you've ever seen Doug Engelbart do the mother of all demos, which is on YouTube, it's like an hour long, I highly recommend checking it out. A lot of the stuff that he talks about and demonstrates are things that are just sort of coming into creation today in terms of the ability for many people to experience those things. Things like voice interfaces, things like touchscreens and so on. But the other thing that's really obvious in that demo and in that environment was the way in which people changed their behaviors to essentially moderate what they were doing so that computers could understand our expression. In other words, you had the mouse. The mouse was invented in the 60s. We still use the mouse today. It hasn't really changed all that much. They even had more advanced mice back then called corded mice that sort of acted like an organ you'd see in like a church. As well, the keyboard itself allows humans to express like these sentences as strings of characters that we have to type individually as individual characters. Can you imagine how much work we've created for ourselves, right? Think about all the characters that have been typed since the 60s and all that work and all that effort. And we're only finally getting to a place where people will be able to start to have more natural interactions with their computing systems. And the way in which we get there, the way in which we bring the future ever closer to the present, is by building platforms that allow people to express, to explore, to experiment, to try new things, to think about new ideas before they're created, and to throw things out to the world and see how they might come back to us. So the idea for this event really is about thinking about those future platforms. We've been in the framework of living kind of on the web pages, the web platform, HTML, JavaScript, all that stuff. And of course, that platform is not going away, but it's being augmented and enhanced by other types of technologies that are just starting to become widespread. And so today you're going to hear from a number of different folks who are working on those platforms. From Uber's perspective, we are building a transportation and logistics company, but we are also building an entertainment platform. And I'll be talking a little bit about that with Jonathan. We'll also be talking about where location and tracking and ambient awareness and environmental computing is going with Marissa from Foursquare. We'll also be hearing from Katie from SoundHound and the Houndify platform for how voice as a conversational interface is going to enable people to actually engage with the services and brands that they already know and already love in a much more profound, much more organic and emergent way than I think has been possible before. And if possible, we may also have another friend who will be joining a little bit later talking about work conversations and bots and assistants and how conversations might be changed there. But we'll see if he shows up. In any case, this event is being live streamed on YouTube right now. This place that we're in is called Capital Factory. It's an amazing sort of I hadn't even thought about this until this moment, but like this co-working facility, as well as Accelerator, as well as like all these other things that, exist now, didn't exist in 2006 when I started one of the first co-working spaces in San Francisco. Putting that idea out into the world and sort of open sourcing it as a platform for work and collaboration and bringing people of the internet together was sort of just an idea. And I'm just like reflecting on the fact that this exists and this is like something that we take for granted. Is something that we sort of like pioneered back then and now has come back, at least to me, in spades. So I'm extremely excited to be here, to be in this environment, to be here with you guys. Josh and Holly have been amazing supporters of this event. I'm excited to be back in Austin. This is like my 20,000th year at South by Southwest. It's still jumping the shark every year. But anyways, I'm excited to welcome you, and we're going to try to keep this somewhat informal. This is why we have Fireball, because it's not South by unless you're drinking Fireball. And we're going to do something today that we're calling rapid fireside chats. So Jonathan Libov is from Union Square Ventures. He and I sort of came to a realization about the world sort of simultaneously. How long ago was this? Like 6 months?
February or March. No,
February, this year.
No, it's been a year
Last
ago.
year. Yeah, okay, a year ago. I can't even keep track. About the nature of conversational apps, and as a result, sort of became aware of each other's work. And he and I were just on a panel this morning, and so I sort of convinced him and strong-armed him to come with me at gunpoint in an Uber well, the gunpoint thing is not true, but it's legal here, I think, in Texas. Anyways, he came here under no duress at all whatsoever. In any case, he's going to be our moderator. He's going to be asking a lot of questions. He sees a lot of things as an investor, and that perspective, I think, is going to be really interesting because those of us who are going to be in conversation with him, of course, build these platforms. We drink our own Kool-Aid. He's going to be a little more skeptical and sort of like, what does this mean? What does this really, how does this amount to anything useful and interesting? I guess, well, sorry, I'm having a collision of thoughts. I'm going to be giving out fireball shots to people who ask questions or engage, but since I'm the first person presenting, that will make it difficult for me to do that. So I don't know if it's, I'm not going to mention legalities. Is it possible that there's a volunteer that wants to do fireball shooting? Not directly take, no?
Yeah,
Chris,
sure.
yes, you'll do it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, can I trust you?
No.
No.
Of course
Perfect,
you can.
perfect. Go ahead. Okay. So basically the idea is, and you may or may not get business, but if there are people who are asking questions, and I encourage you either to raise your hand or sort of say, hey, that's bullshit or whatever it is, this is supposed to be sort of an open fireside conversation. And the idea is for you to have an opportunity to engage with us. Part of this also is that these conversations will go on for about 25 minutes, and then those of us who are speaking will be in the room next to this for office hours. So if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can do so then, or if you feel intimidated by all the amazing smart people in this room, that's fine. You can talk to us directly over there. And with that, I think I'm ready to go. Do you want to say anything else about yourself?
No, let's give it a shot.
Okay, great. Anybody have any questions about this? I think that's all the things I was going to say. You guys can all hear? Great. Anybody on the internet? I can't hear you anyways.
So this is gonna get morbid really fast.
Right. Wait. So I have to intro your thing.
Yeah.
So sorry. So the last thing I'll say is in talking about these future platforms, one of the challenges is that a lot of folks will sort of imagine that these things are not coming anytime soon, that these things are 50 years in the future, and so it gets very abstract very quickly. And as Jonathan and I were talking about this subject, he came up with this amazing kind of like anecdote that I think actually brings it home in a way that sort of might allow you to open your minds to the possibilities that will be enabled by the platforms that we're building. So with that, there you go.
So it came out of a conversation I was having at lunch with a friend, and we came up with this hypothetical scenario. Let's say that Apple came up with effectively the V2 of Siri, something that was vastly smarter, better understanding voice, and they were aware of the fact that Siri's reputation is not terribly good. People kind of mock Siri for what it can't do. And so let's say they decided, we want to introduce this as a new thing. We want to kind of shed some of the reputation that Siri has and start fresh. And so they give V2 a new name, call it Jane. Now, if you've ever seen, like kids will walk up to TVs, right? They will, they think they can touch everything, right? They'll swipe it and wonder why nothing's happening, right? And if you have any like little kids or in your life, you'll see they love Siri, right? They love it. And one of the questions here would be, let's say Apple wanted to retire Siri. Well, how would they actually retire it? Would they set a date at which, like Friday at 6 p.m., Siri turns off and Jane turns on? Would they sort of announce that Siri is retiring or going away? Do they hold like a mass public funeral for Siri? I mean, it's really not hard to imagine like the billboard that says like goodbye in light Myriad Pro, letting
San Francisco display, probably.
I guess now it's in San Francisco. Yeah, that's right. Well,
Okay. For old time's sake.
sure. Which is, and so this whole sort of anecdote makes you think about, if Siri went away, wouldn't there be like a little tinge of sadness? And like, wouldn't your little kid cousins or your own kids have kind of wonder where Siri was going and feel a little bit sad about it? And the anecdote is sort of meant to convey that these things all kind of seem like future platforms, things that are, as sort of Chris said, like 10 years out, I don't know, 20 years out. Looks like Minority Report. But these things kind of tend to sneak up on you. And I think the fact that we probably all would have a tinge of sadness if Siri went away might suggest that some of this future is kind of already here. And so that's sort of the context in which we would maybe want to talk about some of these future platforms. So Chris is now at Uber. What is Uber?
So, just to give you guys some context, one of the sort of things that we're trying to also do is sort of think about where these platforms have come from and how people understand them. Because the way that they're going to change and mature is different than where they've been in the past as consumer applications. So, in the case of Uber, and by the way, Chris, do you mind taking time? Being the time taker?
Oh, sure. How
Great.
much time do you want?
Like 25 minutes.
Okay.
Perfect. Because I could probably talk all day, and there's lots of people here that I want to hear from. So Uber, as you guys know it today, is largely sort of a way of safely and conveniently and efficiently getting from point A to point B. It sort of does in some ways complement taxis, and it got its start actually in the black car business, where there was just a lot of available and extra capacity in the marketplace, where these drivers sort of would have 1 or 2 rides a day, and that was it. And so Uber was able to take those folks who were out there in the world, and then through their transportation and logistics network, allow people to request those cars that had excess capacity so that you could get a ride from point A to point B. And the moment that Uber sort of grew up in, which started 5 years ago, was in the moment 2 years after, I think it was 2 years after, because the iPhone came out in 2007, so maybe it was like 2010, anyways, whatever it was. Several years ago, of course, once people started to have smartphones, they had GPS, they had internet wherever they were then able to sort of go into this application, request a car, the car magically appears, takes them from point A to point B. And so that's kind of, I guess I won't jump ahead, but that's kind of like the answer to your question, I think, right now.
And so one of the things I think that Uber did so successfully is that it became, it fit that slot on page 1 of your iPhone, right? Like if you look at like the big winners in the mobile era, it's been what were the 12 apps when the iPhone was 3.5 inches, and it's 16 or 20 apps now that it's a little bit larger. What are those apps on like page 1 of your iPhone? And Uber really became certainly fit that slot, right? It's one of the biggest maybe 16 to 20 needs that you have as a person moving about the world. And in many ways, what Uber succeeded at was becoming like the eponym for e-hailing, or hailing a cab from your phone.
E-hailing, that's such a bad.
I know, it's just antiquated. I don't know. It's,
you should drink.
Dude, fireball shot every time
Where's
you
my
use
volunteer?
terrible jargon. Yeah.
Who can I bring?
You can just stand back there if you like. No, you're good.
So it's like Kleenex for tissues, Q-tips for cotton swabs. Uber is what people say when they book,
It's not cotton swabs, but yeah.
cotton
No, I'm just
tip
kidding.
swabs.
It's okay.
Let's not go into the weeds here.
But yes, I get what you're saying.
Yep, and what's sort of interesting with the Facebook Messenger integration is that now that you've sort of in a way secured, becoming the name for getting a cab, and people literally say, we should Uber it, should we grab Uber or Lyft, it's starting to expand. I mean, you need to think about other platforms where you can reach customers. And so how do you guys think about that?
So another way to sort of like think about this question, I think, is one what you're talking about, which I think is super profound and interesting, just sort of generally speaking, is like, how do you become sort of a verb that people, when they think about a need, they think about an intention, they think about something that they want to do, how do you fit into that space and occupy that space and crystallize whatever it is that they're trying to do, and then become the way in which they achieve that outcome, right? So for now, these 16 to 20 different icons on your home screen represent a set of verbs that you want to engage in, frequently. If it's like Instagram, it's like, oh, I want to like share a photo of what's happening right now. If it's like Snapchat, maybe it's like a brief video or whatever. Maybe there's something about news or messaging and so on. And so I think for Uber, what's really interesting is as we've somewhat moved away from a car ownership society, certainly in urban environments, there is still this question and this need: how do I get efficiently from point A to point B? And of course, you can do that through transit and so on. But Uber was the first that said, look, just wherever you are, we will like deliver a vehicle to you. And so to build out, I guess, an answer to your question as well, once there was a clear kind of answer to like, okay, what does Uber do? It sort of gets you from point A to point B. Then the question is, well, what are the contexts? Where are you in the computing environment where you actually want to be able to request a ride or get somewhere? And so this is historically thinking about the Uber platform. We actually started, I would say, in the last 12 to 16 months, really focused on just the Uber API. It was very basic, very primitive in the beginning. It didn't even have ride requests, is that right?
It started with just metadata.
Yeah, it was just metadata about stuff, right? And then eventually we added the ability to actually request a ride. So now, third-party applications, City Mapper, Google Maps, and so on, had the ability to essentially offer Uber-like functionality, or indeed Uber functionality, within their applications through deep links, the ability to open up an experience where you have the origin and the destination set so that you can get the car to you. And so that allowed Uber, of course, to spread without having to sort of earn all of those customers directly. In other words, we worked with our partners to make their apps better, and in fact, ended up showing something like a 10 or 13% improvement in usage of those apps. And what's the word called?
Time spent in the
Time
app.
spent? Yeah, anyways. Sorry. So Chris and I work together on the platform. He's the one that has all the ideas. In any case, the point is, like, we were able to sort of spread out that verbification of get me a ride into all these different apps and platforms that had distribution. And that sort of, I think, would describe the first era of the platform. So historically looking at that, right?
Right, and so right now I can book an Uber, obviously, from the app. I can do it from Facebook Messenger, which is sort of interesting. You can book, I think they just added Lyft as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, let me describe that. So if you guys haven't tried it yet, you can actually request an Uber within Facebook Messenger. So there are two ways to do this, but the way in which it might actually happen is if you're texting, let's say, or messaging with several of your friends, and you mention, hey, I'm going to this thing at Capital Factory, you guys should show up. Well, if any of your friends taps on that address, Capital Factory, a menu will show up and it'll say, get me a ride here or show location. And when you click get me a ride, it'll actually open up a thread with an Uber account, essentially the Uber account on Facebook, that'll say, okay, great, let's go through the process. You say, where are you going? Well, we already know that because we've set that before. How do you want to pay? Well, if you've already sent friends money through Facebook Messenger, then it uses that payment account. And you have the entire Uber experience within Facebook Messenger. If you don't even have the Uber app, it works. So this is like a really profound way of actually, again, getting Uber distribution in the world. And yes, of course, now it's sort of get me there could be serviced by a number of other companies depending on where you are in the world.
Right, and I think what's sort of interesting is if you think about the grid of app icons model, right? Everything is very explicit. I'm going to launch this experience, I'm going to tap on this button in order to do X, Y, or Z. And when I first saw the Uber in Facebook Messenger thing, I was having a conversation with someone and they asked this question like, yeah, because it's really hard to book an Uber from the app. Like I really need to use Messenger. But I think you sort of answer that question in the sense that it's not so much about having an extra button in another app, so much as it is all this explicitness that we used to have in computing and even on mobile is starting to break down, right? Like now that, in particular, now that we're getting kind of good at AI, photos are now not just blobs of bits. We actually now we can tell what's in a photo, right? You can use Clarify or Google Photos to see that. Now that we're getting a little bit better at NLP, we can tell the context of I want a ride, which is actually much more sort of implicit even than Google itself, where you might, you would have Googled something and it sort of gathers your, you state your intent. Essentially, this gathers it much more implicitly. And I suppose that would probably lend itself to a variety of other platforms as a more general concept of how you interact with Uber.
Yeah, and again, like, we start very basic with these things, right? Because I think in some ways what you're talking about, what's curious about, and of course Jonathan and I have been talking a lot about like messaging platforms, and so that's sort of like where our head is at. One of the things that we're starting to see with assistants and bots and AI is the ability to sort of layer on understanding, meaning, the ability to then interpret what it is that you're talking about, and then provide a set of maybe suggestions or very contextually relevant answers to the question that you might not even know that you have, right? It's just like, God, like, let's go to this thing. I have no idea how to get you there, right? And if you've never heard of Uber and you never have all these other things, there is now a way for the platform that you're having a conversation in to augment that experience and provide suggestions to you that are directed,
Right.
And so I think that, again, like where we've started is in that very straightforward approach, and I think where we're going is to start building up that context in ways that are very profound.
Okay. Speaking of context, I have a question about Uber trip experiences, but why don't you maybe introduce that to anyone who's not familiar with it?
Sure, thank you. So, we didn't practice at all, right? This year, so like I was saying, like we've sort of had this Uber API for a while. As of this year, we're really starting to think more about this as a platform, hence this whole sort of like thing, this conversation today. And when we think about Uber as a platform, we're really starting to try to figure out what are interesting data sets that we can make available to the world, to the developer ecosystem, that will allow for emergent potentials that we ourselves as Uber either can't build, won't build, or haven't thought about, or won't think about. There's a lot of smarter people in the world than there are that work at Uber, even though there's a lot of people working there and we're hiring. Sorry. I need ad block or something. Anyways, so as we're sort of shifting from this API-focused world to one that's more platform-based, we're starting to think about ways that we can open up context about users, of course, with their permission. And so this year, we opened up the Trip Experiences API, which essentially it's very simple in terms of what it does. It allows any application, again, with the user's permission, express permission, to know when they're getting in an Uber, and to know certain things about the ride that that person's about to take when they're in that Uber. So previously, if you had integrated the ride with Uber button in your application, you could know information about that ride because you had initiated it, right? So you know the user's already taking a ride, and you get to sort of watch them along the way, because if you built an app that replicates the Uber experience, you want to be able to show the user, well, the ride, the car is coming, you're in the car, you're on your way, you've arrived, great. Like the entire experience can be encapsulated in somebody else's application. What we hadn't made available was the ability for other applications to know about those rides that have been initiated by other applications or within the Uber app itself. Okay? So what we opened up was the ability for any third-party application to take advantage of that context, that you're about to go someplace, that it's going to take you this long to get there, that you're coming from this place, and essentially that you have free time. So for all those applications that you as the user have decided to trust with that information, they can become a lot more relevant in the information that they show you when you open them up. So in other words, if I'm using the NPR app, right, I open it, or NPR One, I open it today, and it's just going to like play the newscast, and it's going to like play some podcast that's like 25 minutes. What if my ride is only 10 minutes, right? Now I have to sort of go back to the app later. I've got to remember that. I've got to sort of like keep a cognitive bookmark about that. It's terrible. But if NPR One, and I love NPR One, if NPR One knew that I had 7 minutes, or 12 minutes, or 13 minutes, or whatever, and could actually create a playlist of content that fit that time perfectly, my relationship with NPR One becomes so much better and so much more context-driven that we would start to actually, again, sort of open up this platform for other people to do similar things across a number of different categories of applications. Not to sort of like steal Foursquare's thunder, but as it is today, I'll be in my Uber, I'll open up Foursquare, and I've got to triangulate my current location to where I'm about to arrive in order to get recommendations on where I'm going. What Foursquare should be able to do is have clairvoyance about where I'm about to be, because I'm in an Uber, the Uber knows where I'm going, and now Uber can tell Foursquare, again with my permission, that I'm about to be at this place. And so it can reorient the entire application around that destination. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think is super interesting about our platform and where it's going to go next.
It sort of sets up like an interesting race in the sense that when let's say I've booked an Uber to a restaurant or a movie theater, right? You can write an explicit line in your database that says, I'm going to this destination. And you can think of that as Uber's brain about your ride. One of the funny things about when I first saw trip experiences, my first thought was, well, there isn't maybe one other time during the day than when I get in a cab that I just open my phone and start doing stuff, right? I don't need the phone to say, hey, I'm still in your pocket and you can do things. I just take out my phone and I start flipping through Twitter or Snapchat or whatever.
Yeah.
It's automatic, right? And so it's, in a sense, it's competing with like this brain, which says, like, well, I have free time, my hands are free, I'm going to use my phone.
Your reptile brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all have one.
Yeah.
I think.
I wasn't sure if that was personal. It's highly evolved. I'm highly evolved.
Highly evolved reptile.
As an individual. And there's another brain which is sitting inside the phone, which there is a gyroscope and an accelerometer and GPS, which can tell, well, it's about this time of day that you generally leave work. You're starting to drive in the direction of your home. Seems like you're on the way home. And there's sort of like kind of not competing, maybe not interests there, but there's sort of different ways of getting at the same experience. I don't know, how do you think about that, and where's Uber's role in that?
I mean, I think this is a super interesting question just in terms of future platforms in general, because this conflict about partial information in the world and different perspectives, of course, what the different sort of priorities are. One of the things that could happen is like you get in the car and you get a million push notifications because like, oh, you're in an Uber, you got like free time, like I'm gonna monopolize your time, man, right? And now you need like your phone's brain to be like, screw you, like like I'm the sort of agent for this person, and
right.
You have to ask me permission first, etc. What I would say is that right now we're still in the early days of this transition to where applications are thirsty for data and information, certainly contextual information about people, and again, how we generate systems that are able to capture that information with the right fidelity and with the right nuance and with the right understanding is early days. So again, like before, we required people to like type things out in strings and keyboards. Now we have these sensors, and these sensors are somewhat lossy. I mean, they're like, okay, this is your geo, your lat long, right? But I don't know anything about your lat long. You could be in the bathroom, or you could be like in an elevator, like whatever. And so I think the question is like, how can these platforms sort of open up data in the right way, with the right context, and then co-create opportunities with these platform providers to become more sensitive to these opportunities. Right. In addition, right, like if you think about all the Internet of Things, or the way that we're like, adding all these systems or putting our lights on the internet, all of that stuff creates more overhead for this brain. Like the stuff that I have to manage and like think about, like I'm wasting a lot of my cognitive cycles. My brain is always tired. And I reptilian. My reptilian brain is probably less involved than yours. And as a result, if I'm imagining the world that we're bringing to the mass of people, and all the choices about permission, all the choices about privacy, all the choices about who's your friend, who's not your friend. Is this brand your friend? This brand wants to be your friend. Like they added you on Facebook, they added you on Twitter. Like all of these, it's just a surplus of cognitive overhead. How can we use this context to become a little bit more subtle? The way in which you and I get to like get to know each other, I can't even use language anymore, is very subtle and has evolved over like many, many years, right? Just in terms of us as a species. Computers and humans still don't really know exactly how to interact with each other. It's still this awkward dance. And as you said, like with the Siri example, eventually that Siri that we know today will be retired for something more elegant. So I think that when I think about these platforms and systems, it's really begging that question of how do we make these systems actually feel just much better, more intuitive, more sensitive. Because we've been going through this with sort of a brute force method so far, and it's fine and it's worked, and you have to sort of be very programmatic about the way that you roll out these systems. But I think in the future, the way in which children interact with computers is going to be completely different than the way that we do. And that's what I think is so interesting about your early, sort of story and question is like, we're stuck thinking about the world through the Google lens, through typing many, many queries in many different ways to get to the thing that we want.
Right.
Kids are not going to have the same, patience. And so that changes what the expectations are. That changes the way these things will be built.
You have this sort of like traditional model of I'm going to follow this app or website's model of
Yeah.
how to
Of
give a
interaction.
service that I know with it, right?
Yeah.
You have on the other end of the spectrum this sort of broad sense of AI, that this thing that knows exactly where you are and where you're going and what you're doing, but we may be a long way off from that. Like I'll open Spotlight and the series suggestions are like at 3 p.m. when I'm in New York City, and it's like gas and nightlife, right? Well, I don't drive,
Right.
and it's 3 p.m., so I'm not going to like a club
Right.
now.
Right.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, and I think one of the things that's compelling about Uber experiences is it sort of launches with just enough context to narrow the problem space down.
It's just to build out the context.
Right.
It's not complete, it's not sufficient, but there will be a generation of people, I think, that grow up that have a different set of expectations around the computing systems that they live with and that service them, or provide service to them, or that they interact with and engage with.
Right.
So I think that's sort of what's happening. How are we doing for time?
You have 5 minutes.
Great. Do you want any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. How do you guys feel about doing questions? Anybody have any questions? Yes. Volunteer. Yes.
I'll pass on the firewall. So when Uber started, so we were supposed to start in Paris, you actually started in New York in a very niche environment, the black cars, right?
Yeah.
And so then beyond that, the market found you, Uber then expanded.
Hmm.
So, and Uber subsequently expanded numerous times into numerous different things, becoming a delivery service, Uber Rush, all the rest of the things. And now we're talking about using it as a platform.
Yep.
But as you said, Uber's not gonna do a lot of this stuff. You wanna open it up so somebody else can do it.
Yep.
So how do you decide as Uber what you are gonna do?
Yeah. It's a super interesting question. Again, I've been at Uber for 2 months, so I'm still absorbing the Kool-Aid. It's, in my pores, but it's not quite, thoroughly turned me purple or pink or whatever our colors are.
Not pink.
Not pink. Specifically not pink. Dark black, grayish. Anyways, I can get you the hex code. I think, first of all, the way that Uber talks about itself internally is really as a technology and logistics company. And so it's really looking at ways of efficiently moving things, bits and atoms, which is our new branding thing, moving people and stuff from point A to point B. And if you can imagine, like AWS, cloud services, have enabled application developers to focus more on the service that they're delivering rather than the storage and the way of scaling on the back end. We want to be able to do the same thing for, I think, businesses and brands and services, individuals. And so there will be, and we hope there will be, a broad ecosystem of application providers and makers that meet people at all different sort of rungs of the economic ladder, if you will. So there'll be sort of small business apps that help facilitate deliveries, flower shop apps or whatever. We will, of course, build some of those apps as both best practices and as an ability to sort of create more of that opportunity in the marketplace. But I mean, this is a very broad way of sort of answering your question because I don't have a precise answer. It's that, again, we first and foremost look at ourselves in that way, in logistics and transportation and technology. And we find core use cases that we think are really, make sense for our business and the platform. And then we find other ways that partners that we work with can enhance those experiences and services. So maybe that's not a great answer, but it's, again, if you, the reason why I answer it that way is because if you look at all the way that other platform providers think of themselves, it starts to give you a sense for the types of platforms that they end up building. I mean, I love Twitter, but Twitter's confusion about what it was, sort of existentially, I think was part of the reason why their platform sort of struggled to figure out what's for us, what's for our community, and how do we sort of offer up pieces of that to the outside world. The more that I think a technology company knows what it is and knows what it's doing and knows what it's trying to achieve in the world, the more solid that platform, I think, is for third parties. Other questions?
I have one question.
you want some Fireball?
No.
No, jeez.
So as you said, you are trying to enhancing the user point of view. And Uber is like a multi-sided business. So if you don't have a driver, you don't have business, right? Do you have any plan to enhance the same thing that you are doing for user, doing the same thing for driver?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And it's actually a question that I've received a lot, whether or not we're going to offer driver-side APIs. And it's, again, because we get this question a lot, it's something that we're certainly looking at. We don't have anything that we can like specifically state right now that's like our plan, but we're very aware of it. Our drivers are incredibly important to us, and finding ways of offering them, benefits or additions or augmenting their experience is something that we're always like, I think, thinking about and talking about. Anything else that you'd add to that?
No,
Okay. Yes.
How do you decide who to partner with for the API? Because now instead of individual developers, it's corporation developers, I guess you're partnering. How's that different?
I don't know if that's exactly, so the question is like, who do we partner with? Like, do we partner with big corporations or small developers? And in fact, we have a lot of independent developers that are building on our platform that are doing profound things. Teleport is a really interesting example where it's an app that has created the ability to essentially teleport your friend to you. So, if I want like Chris to come like meet me someplace and we're not in Messenger, for example, I can send a car to him and then that car will bring him to me. So I've teleported him to me, and that is built by a third-party developer. There's another app that a third-party developer has built that allows you to schedule Ubers, because that's not something that we offer in our primary model. So I guess we look at both larger companies as means to, one, get distribution, but also ways of bringing in more content to our user experience, and then to enhance those applications and the way that they serve their customers. And then we have an open API. If you go to developers.uber.com, anybody can register and build an app. You don't need permission from us. You do need permission to get whitelisted in order to launch your application. Okay, thanks. We'll do one more question. To get whitelisted in order to launch your application, so that we make sure that you have a privacy policy and that your application is not doing spammy things. But other than that, you can build an app for yourself. In fact, you can add developers to it, and you can like use it for your own good for as long as you like. So I think that we're actually fairly balanced in working with both companies and independent developers.
Just to be super clear, there is no decision, so it's an open platform. And the whitelisting is just to make sure we're protecting riders and drivers from anything that's spammy. It's a very lightweight process. So, and you can immediately start requesting rides for yourself without whitelisting, in fact, just to test it out.
Yeah.
Earlier you talked about thinking of Uber as an entertainment platform, but I didn't hear you really get into that. What does that mean for Uber in 5 years, sort of in a dreamy way, like what you're all dreaming of?
I would say, and maybe I misspoke if I said that, Uber is an entertainment company, in so much as we're interested in providing a platform that enables entertainment experiences. Like, I don't know and can't speak to any like plans to become an entertainment company, but you may be entertained through your Uber experience. And by that, I mean, again, when we're talking about the Trip Experiences API, I mean, the NPR1 example is just one example of that. But you can imagine getting into, let's say, requesting an Uber, and we talked about this before, like the idea that you put in movies, right? The experience that you want is movies. And currently, the way that it works now is like you have to sort of think about, okay, what movies are playing that I want to watch? Okay, gotta go like watch some trailers.
You're going to the theater.
Going to the theater, yeah.
Right, or just in movies. So it's not like that TV in the back seat of an Uber.
Oh, thank you.
You're going to the movie theater.
Thank you. A place
Yeah.
in the world
Yeah.
that has a large screen.
Right. You're not getting into an Uber in order to watch a movie. 2 hours.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
you're right. So I guess I'm living in the future a little bit in the sense that I'm thinking like, okay, what do I actually want to do? Like, do I want to go out to a club and I want to go dance, or do I want to like go to the movies?
Yeah.
Which is a place. It's still a destination that exists in the world. It may become sort of Oculus-sized eventually, but anyways. So say you want to go to the movies, again to a theater, and that's what you type into the app. It's no longer kind of doing all the pre-work of doing your homework, watching the trailers. Okay, I want to see this movie. When is it playing? Where is it playing? Now I got to like message my friends. Do you want to go? It's more like you express that intention or that desire, and while you're on your way, because we're working with Fandango or because we're working with like Movie Phone or like whatever other movies apps are out there, they're able to layer in information that's super relevant, that makes sense and helps you make a decision while you're in the ride, where it says, okay, you want to go now, you have some time. Within 20 minutes of you arriving at the theater, these are the movies that are playing. and we've sort of pre-selected these for you based on our knowledge of your preferences, based on past behavior or choices. And so I think, like, in that sense, it's no longer just about, okay, get me to a movie theater because I've already done all the work before and I've done all the coordination and it's the last step before the thing happens. It's like, I have a desire and Uber is going to help you actually, like, achieve it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
And so I think, like, whether it's like local guides or whether it's other like games or stuff like that that can happen on the trip, those are things that we're actually looking at, and it's not 5 years away. We're gonna be seeing stuff happen this year. Okay, I think that's actually it for questions. We're gonna be doing office hours. Chris, are you gonna do it? Okay, so Chris is gonna be the office hours person since I gotta pour Fireball to no one who wants a drink. Come on, guys, this is like South by. You guys are disappointing me. Anyways,
You won't tell who I am.
why don't you come up here? Okay, so this is Chris Saad. He is the PM of the API. Is that like your official title?
Head of product.
Head of product, even
No
better.
bragging.
He just got promoted. No, that's actually his title. He works, I work with him actually on the Uber platform and API. He's been at Uber for like 300% more time than me.
Yeah. More than 50.
450% more time than me, so
Yeah.
he has way more information and knowledge about the company and about plans for the platform. In fact, he's sort of like the strategist behind all of it. So he's gonna be in the other room over there for office hours. And if you guys wanna go deeper on any of the things that I talked about, that's where to do that. So thanks for your attention. We're gonna, let's see, we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back with Marissa from Foursquare. Great, sound good? All right, guys.
It's very guy. Just like it's about kind of very personal.
I mean, it's dangerous. I typically answer actually Oh, that's good. That's good.
Not very nebulous.
Yeah, that's why you need to be more. Like a lot of honestly, a lot of
Oh, yeah, that's good. A lot tighter. It's just four partners.
I'm the IT side of things, so I'm not on the membership side. But the last numbers that I heard is that we had close to 800 members and resulting in about 2 million. So that's varying degrees of membership. Yeah, it's varying degrees of membership. Like if we're talking about on-site, like maybe we have 200 members. Sorry. We have like casual co-working, like this space normally is at and then these are dedicated desks, and then on 5 and 7 we have private offices. So yeah, so there's different levels at which you can like physically work here, and then beyond that, like we have an accelerator side as well. So that's another part of the Well, there's like the accelerator here. Yeah, the accelerator here is something that's a little more unique to us. It's where we actually take product and customers and make basically try to get some more funding off the ground and into a more productive direction. Like, it's not just a matter of like, here's a space where you can come work. It's like, let us get you the funding.
That's the accelerator.
That's the accelerator.
They have no funding, no outside funding.
Well,
That's
they
the idea more or
right.
less.
They have some like that's society where we get people in touch like with Central Texas Angel Network and get like angel investors. We have a fund. I think that I don't know the exact numbers, but like we'll invest a certain amount of money in your product if we believe it's a viable product, and then we have match it. Yeah.
So where's capital factors?
I don't know.
Well, they might try to maybe some return.
Yeah. Like, I could introduce you to some of our accelerator team and they could probably explain better. I make sure that, like, TDs and like, that's literally my job. Like, I'm the IT coordinator, I make sure things work.
So accelerators is equity. Yeah. Someday, yeah. Actually, it looks like, but not in interest, but not in the, so that comes with the idea, yes. The workspace is combination now.
So like so like putting some more on the team that's playing with this space. I should plug those
Invested you $20,000.
Yeah, so like you can play music, episodes, just try to be as versatile as possible. Well, yeah, man. South by in particular, like, those will probably have like office hours. Cool. Cheers, guys.
Every one of us said the same thing. No, I heard we're staying. So nobody can look at it. It's like until they tell me. Assuming we're staying. Oh, is it the one that we had to talk about? It's on. But like apparently we didn't know we bought it. I don't know, yeah, I love that. Where are you based?
I don't want to take a day off anymore. I've got this one off. I don't know how to do this hand QR code in the photo. I don't know what the next step is called. Just a hand QR code and go in.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Very much like him, how basically what's missing. Very that was when I was at he was like, they were on the phone, like talking to
What's your Twitter handle? At Marissa Chacko, Marissa. Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna start in 1 minute. So if you got any more food, beer, or Fireball, please come drink some Fireball. Like we've got a lot of it.
You sold this well. I'm gonna have some.
I'm not recommending or anything, but it's just it's here and available for these
Take two.
rapid fireside chats. Okay. Just make sure you guys project just for the live stream.
Okay. By the way,
Yeah.
I'll do the timer and then I'll just show it to you. Usually I'll just like let you guys see where you're at.
Yeah.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah,
just watching. I'm
good.
looking out for you.
The like, in the middle one is like,
I know people to know.
yeah.
The live stream again.
USB events this weekend.
No.
Hanging out.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of, we don't do a lot of we're starting to do
All right, guys, I'm going to ask you to silence your conversations. If you want to keep talking, please go out to the office hours area. If you guys are here to watch the Fireside chat, if you guys want to come forward, that'd be great too, so we can keep it a little more intimate. I'm going to be still, this time I don't need a volunteer, so I'm going to be manning the fireball station. If you guys just want a shot, you can just like raise your hand, I'll come over and give it to you, because like the last way wasn't working. And if you do ask a question, I'm not going to ask you to like ask for a fireball shot, but it would be nice. Anyways. Okay, so we're going to continue now with the next rapid fireside chat. It's so good. It just rolls off the tongue.
We came up with that term yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah. Which apparently someone else said that they invented, but I can't speak to that. Anyways, so Jonathan's going to now talk to Marissa from the Foursquare platform. I'll let you guys take it away.
Okay. So one of the kind of recurring themes today is that we have apps, right, that live on the grid of app icons on your home screen. And now that we're maybe 7 to 8 years into mobile, which if you saw Chris Dixon's post on what's next in computing, he made the observation that we're actually probably about halfway through this cycle, which is kind of hard to believe. And so, Foursquare is very well known as an app for checking into locations and for, by the way, disclosure, Union Square Ventures is an investor in Foursquare. So I do know a thing or two here. Foursquare is very well known for being an app for initially checking in places. I think it kind of first caught fire here in South, and also as the best guide to your city. Like I rely on it seriously every single day. But so I don't. You want to give maybe a little bit of the history and?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we started out here being known as a check-in app, and I think that's what we became famous for. But our story's really evolved, from the check-in app to splitting the apps and becoming this kind of location discovery, as well as check-in. And then now we're really moving towards this sort of feeling of location intelligence and how do we bring that to developers as well as use it for our own apps. So.
Who are you?
Oh, sorry. I'm Marissa Chacko.
What do you do?
I am the product manager at Foursquare. I'm one of a few product managers. I focus on growth and some of our special projects that I work with Dennis, our co-founder, on. So I get to work on some of the cool new things that we do with the data. So yeah, our new story is really around like, okay, we get all this awesome data from our users, and then how do we turn that into interesting insights that are actionable for other developers to use? So how can you take something like, the way the phone interprets the world, right? It sees all this data. How do you transform that into something that's useful and that actually mimics the way humans see data? So that's sort of like what we think about as location intelligence. And so that means, taking like a lat long and that sort of data, telling you, okay, that means you're at Pete's Coffee. But Pete's Coffee in and of itself isn't even that interesting. It's knowing that Pete's Coffee is a coffee shop. These are the things that you should get there. These are photos about it. This is the metadata. That's like what kind of humanizes that experience. And I think that's the sort of thing that we want to offer to other developers. So that's sort of our news story. And I think we continue to use that data to support our own apps like Foursquare and Swarm. But we also are now supporting tons of partners. We have like 100,000 developers that use our APIs, so that's pretty crazy. But some of the big ones are like Apple, Microsoft, Twitter, Pinterest. So got a lot of users right now.
Can you talk about what those platforms are using the Foursquare data platform for?
Yeah, so Twitter uses it for geotagging your tweets. So if you guys want to try like tweeting from here, you can tap the location icon, and the way that it knows that you're at Capital Factory or you're close by to Capital Factory is coming from us. So they're sending us the data from your phone, and we're interpreting that and giving them recommendations of where you're likely at. So that's like a very common use case, and I think we're really well suited to handle those types of things. And sort of kind of a question that was asked, I think, to Chris, like what should and shouldn't you do? It's sort of like, if there's another company that already offers the service to do the really hard thing, don't try and rebuild that. Focus on the differentiator that's like new and different for you. And I think that's sort of why we think our service is great, because a lot of people need location data. But you don't have to rebuild it from scratch. You don't have to try and map the world. We already did that. So just use our services and then focus on like building really cool stuff with that. And that's how we can fit in.
Yeah, no, and Foursquare can be really almost unbelievably good at identifying when you're sort of in a new location or in a new area, and can make recommendations around there. I think there was a period when Foursquare was sort of in the same way that Skype is sort of like the best app for knowing when people's birthdays are. That Foursquare was sort of the best app for knowing when you're in traffic, because it would like think like you're in a cab in the city and you're just like. It sends you a proactive recommendation that you're like by a bar. Well, I'm actually just sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
But it's over time, like I have to say, it's gotten so good. And I think that also sort of speaks to what we're talking about with Chris about being explicit versus implicit, without having to say, okay, I'm here. What can I search for around me?
Yeah, definitely. I think like that searching paradigm, that's in all of our apps and part of our apps, is still like incredibly difficult and painful. And like the more that I think we can be proactive about trying to understand your context, like whether you're driving in an Uber or you're about to go somewhere or you just landed at Austin, it's South by, it's likely you're probably going here, the better we can understand and predict that, I think the more contextually relevant information we can provide, and other developers can use that information too. So we know, like, for example, if you've never been to Austin before, at least in terms of our history, so we can say like, oh, you're brand new to Austin, here are like some of the best places that you can't miss. Or if you have spent a lot of time here, we're not gonna bother sending you that because you already know it and we don't wanna be obnoxious. So I think it's being as smart as possible and trying to like constantly push that in terms of like what we can learn and what we can do to avoid sending you the bad notifications and the bad information, and really use it to surface like what's interesting and different.
Okay. And one of the things that I think is sort of interesting is that if you're, I don't know, let's say between the age of like 25 and 40, right? My wife used to get a little bit skittish that I was a Foursquare user, and I would check in everywhere. And she was like, "Well, now the internet knows where you are, right?"
Yeah.
But if you think about kids growing up, and the example of a kid who just thinks that he can swipe everything, like when you grow up in this context, these things become very natural, right? And if you're 15 years old now, by the time you're maybe 20, you're going to expect your phone to know, I think, exactly where you are at all times. Like the idea of us having to have manually checked in somewhere is going to seem so quaint.
Definitely.
And so it just seems like there's so many things that have almost yet to be invented with Foursquare that I think you guys are starting to think about.
Yeah, I think we're definitely exploring with some of our special projects, like how do we make that sort of discovery experience sort of move past even like what's happening with chatbots, where it's really the user has to initiate a lot of the requests, and so there's still a lot of onus put on that user, even if it is just like UberX me from A to B, like they still have to do that. For us, we're trying to think of like what comes after that, and is there a world where we're more like the Google Nows of the world, where they're sort of thinking constantly about like my needs, using my data in a great way to then like send me the information I need at the perfect time. And it's really hard to like get that context right, I think, because trying to get your intent of like what you want for the future, especially when we don't have APIs for everything. An Uber can tell you where we're going, but like the rest of like what you're hungry for tonight is going to be hard for us to predict. So I'm hopeful we still will be able to eventually.
It is hard to predict. Like there's this trope from marketing tech called Rachel's sweater, and it's this idea. It was this idea that in the future, this is by the way Rachel from Friends. That's what the Rachel is. So we're talking about 1995 now.
Who was alive in 1985?
Yeah. Who knows Friends? Yeah. There was this idea that in the future when you're watching TV, you'll be able to order Rachel's sweater, right? Like you'll just, and they'd come up with corny interfaces for selecting her sweater, and a checkout window would pop up. It just seemed like that was always going to be the future, and that now couldn't seem any further off than it did then. And because we're really bad at sort of predicting what kinds of things we can do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting that you guys have become such a strong developer platform, because it really enables all kinds of experiences that maybe you couldn't predict or define.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, we're looking internally at a lot of like these future experiences, and I sort of think of like the movie paradigms of there's like the Minority Report version of the future where you're like just bombarded with all this technology and it's like this horrible dystopian future. Versus like the Her of the world, where it's like this soft, lovely Scarlett Johansson whispering in your ear, right? And it's like,
Who doesn't want that?
yeah, who doesn't want that? And I think that's like the Her is sort of our viewpoint of like that's where we want to go, like minus the creepiness in that movie, but like, how do we get to that point where we are like this thing that can be, know you really well, and that we can be there and you'll give us that like level of intimacy of knowledge about you and like trust in our service. But that's what we want to move towards, and I think like we all as developers have to be really good about not going towards the Minority Report of just bombarding people with all these things, but trying to be like very relevant. Otherwise, I think like people just get sick of us. So.
Right. And so, on the sort of the other end of the spectrum, we used to live in a world where apps were pure silos, right? You launched the app and that was the entire experience. If you wanted something else, you'd close the app and you'd go find the other one. You guys, the Foursquare apps themselves are now platforms for other kinds of experiences as well, and there's some deep linking involved. Could you maybe describe that a bit?
Yeah, we've integrated with a service called Button, which I think is fairly new, and they're like a SDK that allows you to use a bunch of different services. So we use Button for actually our Uber integration, so we don't necessarily have to directly integrate with their API, but we can integrate with this larger service that gives us access to both like Uber as well as like, whatever the open table of Turkey is and all those things. So we don't have to do all those individual integrations, so that's been really great for us. I think there is still something lacking in the app-to-app experience. I feel like, for me personally, like trying to book like, me and my partner are gonna go out for dinner, like that is still like a 4 or 5 app experience, and it's still jumping in and out, and I think that's gonna be the most interesting sort of like design UX paradigm that we need to solve, whether it be with chatbots or deeper integrations. Like how do we solve that problem so it does feel like a seamless user experience, not like this app is really good at this micro task and this app is really good at micro tasks.
It does feel sometimes like, you have, let's say you have 4 friends who go want to like rent a car, right? And you didn't define who the driver was. Well, somebody comes to grab the keys. And it's like when you have, I know the exact sort of experience you're talking about. It's you almost wish that somebody out there would go grab the keys and be like, I'm going to arrange this, through Foursquare and OpenTable and Uber, for you, instead of flipping back and forth between all 3.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like it brings up the larger problem of like how do we all work together in a way that's like repeatable for all these other apps, because even if like we can integrate really well with an Uber, like there's 50 other applications that would also want to integrate tightly with Uber, so like how do they do it in a way that like works for every user, that's like personalized to what services they want to use. And I think then it comes back to like some of the OSs and what becomes the platform. Is it the Apple and Googles of the world? Do we move towards the Facebook and Slack of the world? And like how does Facebook and Slack potentially design those experiences so it is more seamless end to end and it's less of that siloed environment.
Right, and one of the things that's challenging about that as we sort of move from this world of, a grid of app icons to mobile web, which has always been there, but maybe appearing in a messenger or two, and maybe looking out at other potential future platforms. I don't know. I mean, AR, VR, maybe. And also moving experiences inside Uber. There are a lot of screens now, There are a lot of different places to be, and one of the things that's sort of interesting is like the apps almost become like disembodied, right? Like they kind of like, they're like icebergs that kind of, peak above water here, and this is your app, and they peak above water here, and this is your experience in Messenger. I mean, everything outside the app experience is still a little bit nascent, but it does feel like we're moving to a much more sort of distributed world for services.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's the future. I think the challenge is like, how do we maintain that relationship with the user if like we aren't necessarily directly interacting with them through our application? And also like, how do we design a service when we're like, potentially limited to some of these platforms and we don't have the richness of like, 50-page deep app with like every single button customized to exactly our branding, exactly optimized for searching. We can't do any of that necessarily, or we might not be able to, and maybe we go to like a mobile web world and we can still do that. But I think part of the headache, at least for me personally, is like the sort of memory that you have to have for all of these apps. Like I have to use like 30 different UIs, and like I have to kind of remember where they are, and I feel like that brings a lot of sort of cognitive load to users, and I think that the messaging apps like bring that ability to take that down. But on the app developer side, I'm like, but I need all those buttons and like signals and like even just our app icon so people remember to use it. So I think it's hard. I think it's great for users, but it'll potentially be difficult for developers depending on how those platforms develop.
And if you're sort of on the flip side, if you're a service and you have a relationship with your user, it's going to be quite complicated to maintain that same relationship with your user. If they pop up in your app and then if they pop up in a messenger. I mean, this is not particular to Foursquare, but in general.
Yeah, definitely. Like, what's the continuity of that experience?
Right, and what are user expectations? Do they understand? Yeah. Like, will people be confused if they use your app in a, in a messenger or something like that, and you're not logged in? Would they expect that? Well, why don't you know me? This is my phone, or will they feel like, well, I was trying to get away from the Facebook login or something? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like those are questions that like I think it's going to be hard because we're building this new like chat world potentially, but I feel like users are still going to be 4 to 5 years behind it, like until we reach the other side of the cycle. So a large part, I think, we'll be building things and probably not getting it right for a couple of years until we figure out what like users actually resonate with, and like not just us like tech early adopters, but like actual like mom and dad.
And there are a lot of potential different ways to experience Foursquare. I mean, you guys, your data set is sort of so rich. I can see the time. Oh, okay. Your data set is so rich. Like as we said, there's sort of so many different experiences you guys can build and can fit in sort of any different shape or size.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we've seen like a wide variety. I mean, even from just like the basic like geotagging, but also using like our content and metadata in interesting ways. And integrating with a lot of partners like the Chef's Feeds of the world or the Eaters of the world, who were sort of like, symbiotic partners, but also semi-competitors, but like finding good ways to like integrate their content. But ultimately, I think location is just a great signal for all app developers, and I mean, there's probably some you don't really care about location, but for a lot of them, I think it brings like a richness to that app, and I think that's why we think location is really important. It really sends a very clear signal about what the user is doing, right? If I'm at like, El Garaje, like at noon, you probably know I'm eating lunch. Like that's a really specific thing to know about a user, which you don't get from a lat long, and I think that's what makes it interesting.
Can you describe maybe some of the other ways that people are using Foursquare data in ways that may not be terribly obvious?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the ways we have been using the data, like I've work a lot on the push notifications team, and so some of the things we think about are like, triggers. How do we set up the right triggers that aren't just like, oh, you exited a geofence, but like, oh, you live in the mission, and you just came home, and like that's a good time for us to like recommend you something to eat for dinner that night, like maybe a new place that just opened up. So figuring out things like that, or looking at foot traffic data to say like, hey, this new place that just opened, like it's having like a 10x gain in foot traffic that seems really popular. We can recommend that to you, and then on the flip side, we can use that data to predict sales for like different things, like we did an iPhone prediction for our like B2B clients. So we can use that data on both like the consumer side to give you something interesting, as well as for like businesses or like hedge funds who are like, how's JCPenney doing? We can tell you, like, you know, based on the foot traffic. So things like that are like really interesting use cases that we're actually just starting to explore a lot of the different ways that our data can be used.
Describe the iPhone example, 'cause that's a really interesting one.
Yeah, in terms of like the sales and
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, we actually did this past fall, which was we looked at like, you know, the past 4 years of Apple Store traffic based on, I think, the week prior to the launch of like the new iPhone, so like the September standard launches. And we basically made a prediction, and we were predicting, I think, like significantly over what like all the other, you know, kind of houses that do predictions of sales were doing. And we were actually really close, I think pretty spot on based on, and much closer than other sources were. So it seems like that was like actually just like a very good predictor of sales, like people's level of interest going into the Apple Store. And I think that's something that we want to look into more as like, how do we use that data to help people like understand just how users are moving about the world, or how they're engaging with different retailers or brands. And that's sort of like this new B2B world that we've discovered and are really tapping into right now.
Gotcha. It's probably about time that we take some questions.
Who wants a shot?
This guy.
I'm curious, it sounds like you're talking about...
Who are you?
Who am I? Sorry. I'm Tor. I'm a PM as well. I worked on developer products at Google with Chris for a long time, including the Maps API, Legacy API, bunch of other application stuff. And now I work for a fintech company, of all things. And we see a bunch of services we work with that have no relationship with the end user, but are doing very, very well. Stripe, Currency Cloud, something like that. So you mentioned the one of the challenges is maintaining a relationship with the user. And so my question is, as the fight for the home screen becomes harder and harder as the number of apps proliferate, how important is it to actually to maintain that relationship? And is it even a fight worth being in? Are there other better ways to thrive?
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, it's a sort of company-centric view to be like, I want to have the relationship with the user. That might not necessarily be like the user-centric view of like, what's the best for that user? Like, is the best thing for the user for all of these services to be like agnostic and sort of, it doesn't really matter. Like, we all just substitute, and like, you know, maybe the OS level determines what's the best one based on any information we know about you. So I think like the more user-centric view is like, well, it should be based on what's best for their end experience, and it might not be our service, it could be another service. So I think that's the harder part of like, how do we like still deliver value? But yeah, that's a tough question. I don't think I have like a golden answer for that. But I agree. Yeah, I think it's just trying to retain relevance and not become like sort of the, you know, it's like the Comcast fight about becoming like a dumb pipe, right? Like, how do they like not become that thing and stay like relevant? And I think, you know, for us as app developers, like we want to be like relevant to that user. We want users to love us directly, not just love like / dinner tonight, you know. So I think that's what we built our brand around. But
and as a follow-on to that, do you feel like it's maybe particularly true about like location-specific data relative to other parts of data where there is a certain like trust that we have to give you in the sense that of giving Foursquare kind of more information about ourselves or allowing you to tap into that to then share that with others?
yeah, definitely. I think it like takes trust in the brand and being able to like know that we can deliver value back. Because I think if we're constantly just consuming your data and like never turning around anything, then it doesn't seem as valuable. And then also it's like, does the OS then like control the data access at that level, so that way like companies like us are limited, or we're all put on an equal playing field because like everybody gets the same data, maybe nobody gets to run background location, for example, then like that would majorly hurt what we do because we're trying to be like omnipresent, and so that would put us in a different playing field. So yeah, I think there is a lot of that user trust aspect, and that end value that we have to think about.
have you noticed any sort of difference now that Google's Android is allowing app permissions to be more granular? Have you planned for that, or have you noticed any difference in the amount of data that you do collect?
Yeah, we've already done the integration for the new permissions, but I think the adoption of M has been still fairly slow, so it's hard to tell like whether that's actually going to make a meaningful impact. But yeah, it's definitely something we worry about. Like, we always love Android because it's like location permissions, push permissions, it's amazing. Whereas like iOS, we're like, oh god, now they remind you about like we're running background locations, and it's just like one more hurdle. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Android users react to that. I think you know, they may just be so used to it that they're not like necessarily concerned about that in some ways. It's a very different platform and type of user, but or will they adopt the iPhone way and sort of the skepticism? So yeah, it's a good question. And one last one here.
I was wondering if you could talk about your business model right now and how it's evolved over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we had started, you know, Foursquare story started as this check-in company, and there was like, you know, visions of grandeur. We're going to be like, you know, the next Facebook. Like, we were competing head-to-head with Facebook about becoming this new social network, and that didn't really plan out. And I think that was going to be a very different business model than where we landed today, which is really taking like our consumer data, aggregating that into like meaningful insights for like end users, like, you know, understanding iPhone, you know, sales, or doing those predictions, or turning that into location, what we call, can't forget the name, basically like understanding place shapes. So now we're really more about like, how do we use that underlying consumers are sort of the foundation for everything we do, and they're creating all the data that we get. But ultimately, we're not selling them, and we're not selling them ads. That's like not really our end business. Our end business is taking all that data, aggregating that into like location insights, and then using that in other interesting ways for developers, for our partners, for you know, new companies. So that's really our new business model, is focusing more on the B2B business, and the consumer side is just like building really awesome things. And it's kind of great because we're not hamstrung into like, I've got to fit one more ad in here to like get my like ARPU up. We're just like, it's cool. Like, we'll like figure out a different way to monetize, and it's not like at the, you know, at the cost of the end user, which I feel like a lot of times in order to monetize, you have to like make the user suffer a little bit, which we don't have to. So I think that's good.
And is your, like, are you kind of in the programmatic ad buying network, or kind of, did you guys feed into that? Is that a big part of it? Or?
Yeah, we have a product called Pinpoint that actually looks at, you know, the best I can describe it is like, you know, you're playing Words with Friends, and before the ad network is going to send you an ad, it'll send us the information from the phone, like with the lat long and stuff, and we'll say, oh, it looks like you're in a Starbucks. And then there's another, you know, service that's like competing for, you know, people in Starbucks. So we're sort of a player in that space, but we're not necessarily like directly serving the ads. So the ad business is very complicated, and I feel like I don't know what every piece is called, but we fit in there as one of the pieces, but we're not sort of the end or the beginning. We're just one of those middlemen that's like, you know, providing like sort of intelligence on top of like that data, which is sort of what we do for all our partners. Cool, thanks guys.
All right, guys, we're gonna take one more 5-minute break, and then we're gonna have Katie from SoundHound and Houndify talking about voiceification, which is my word, not hers, of apps and experiences.
Thank you. Great stuff. Great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, that was nice. There's a little opposite environment. Check it.
Big deal. This chat.
Good job.
Tell us more. Tell us more interesting stuff. Sorry, Marissa, sorry, what was your name? You guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I was doing that around the same time you guys were looking at it, so yeah, it was a while since trying to be a bit more selective on my abilities. Yeah. But yeah, I don't really want to keep linking yesterday, but I feel like a good one on the so that's how I joined. I joined this fintech because it's like draws in people from finance. And so it's trying to kind of introduce that.
You did better. 5 seconds better. It's not. Yeah,
It's not like people are closed.
I say that because like
I think also you know,
I did a lot of work on
it's not my first company, but never. We were at like 80, which is bigger than any other company. I don't think they really appreciate how much they stress how much goes on. And so it's at the point now where it's big enough that they're actually having a lot of just like they so it's also about managing stuff.
Well, I have to go now. Yeah. But, so good to meet you, Juan Manuel. Very good to meet you. I have you on LinkedIn. I'm here in Austin anytime you want to come back. Welcome.
And it's going very well. One of the things that you mentioned was 97% of VCs and only 3% of VC funded companies have female
annotating all of your data.
So that just says opportunity, right? If you can find a way to be a responsible position crowdfunding equitability, then potentially welcoming selections of boys club, then and obviously I'm not suggesting but it's a way to go. Okay, there's an opportunity here. First, because we can't go out and claim that we offer ourselves. And when you look at the team we have to go out and so we got to fix it. one thing as well is product side. We also have to be aware of competitive bias in our investing in those people that they do. Right. So we have to figure out a way to also influence them.
Yeah, it seems like you have to do content marketing internally to investors to make them aware of the opportunity that they're leaving on the table. They're not excited about diversity.
Yeah, it's because unlike social stuff where you're just buying a product, a lot of people in our model should get actually end up a share. So a lot of people are just coming out of the so that's the lens through which they look at it. So it might be quite brewery, it might be all fixings, it might be technical. They don't necessarily need any of those things. So somehow, figuring out a way
It's going to be a matter of being influenced in the way at this stage.
Weather beautiful today.
Make their decision based on the complete information, but just the fact of them being aware that it played a role,
Pero
that
ir caminando.
just kind of
Quita, ¿no?
We can also run maybe tests. Two versions of the bio.
Yo caminé desde UT hasta acá en México.
Sí, eso realmente no está.
Gracias.
Economics, you guys know that book. Actually, we're curious about whether a certain name has more, affiliation, has some predictive value regarding, let's say, professional success later in life. And their claim was that you could look at their method and see what they analyzed, but it's kind of they pursued also that line of thought and try to test it with data.
Did I miss your talk? It was a doozy. We should invite you to all the conversations. Good. Well, actually, I can't say it's always fun because I've never done it before. It's 100% by sample, according to my data, 100% awesome. He runs the strategic stuff. Sorry, I should say, he runs the integrations with partners like Foursquare. So he is my customer essentially. So I build developer part of the team, build the generic developer stuff, run the self-serve stuff and the torso stuff. His team is kind of out in front, helping integrate stuff.
Sí, pero son para celular.
So, I mean, back
Tienen ahí espacio para
¿Cómo?
Son como para celular. Sí, sí.
Yeah. So he's I think it sounds like there's a lot of overlap on something that he's got. I think he's got a legacy title. So essentially he's head of partnerships. And I'm head of the development platform. But it's all very like if there's a partner who really needs an API that's not on our roadmap, his team will build it as generically as possible and don't need it to us to maintain and advocate for support. It's a very related team. And the core team that I have, like broke off from his team. So I work with, you probably work with Sarah you guys work through public as well, right?
Yeah.
We need to, having case studies, is that the generally, like the whole San Francisco team, it's tough to say. My sense of it is, I'm not really a numbers guy, but it's like there's 6,000 employees. I think about half of them are in San Francisco. And so, that's my sense of it. There's three buildings. There's one on 11th Street in Soho, 11th Market. I don't know, actually. I think it's like a year or two. That's going to be finishing back, and then there's some new work on and so my assumption is that we're going to shut down some of the other ones in the market.
Regulations
So probably keep the 11th and the
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
You're working for capital factor or something?
No, venture capital funds.
All right.
No, it's actually chances are, if they're in San Francisco, it's
already invested.
Let me go first. He says no, I don't know God.
No?
I do.
Yes.
He's a designer.
Well,
Okay. He's a designer, right?
actually, return pack is return pack the capital venture?
Yeah, he's on
Look
the
like
back.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he is.
I thought you
And I was just looking.
or they're nice.
I was just talking about.
Yeah, Microsoft
We're looking for a designer just like him for my team.
Yeah.
TBS.
Indeed, was based in Boston. Big office in Boston.
Ah, yes? Okay. Do you have plans to invest in some Latin American startups or not?
We don't actually sort of keep the geography.
Oh, that's right. So he was like a big deal.
Well, some of
I've heard of his name.
firms like you, like are more like, you know, American based. Well, if you're American, where are you investing in Europe? But for example, have you invested in Latin America?
Okay.
Startups?
We haven't, and it's not, again, it's not for like, we don't plan markets. However, I think one of the reasons why we invest in Europe more than the other firms is really does that, because we don't just sort of say our investment on board. This is why I never so, you know, again, unfortunately, we're really good at your company. Based out of it's a nice city. And it would have been, it would have been, would have come up. I think the company would love to make it work anywhere in the world, but it is a challenge because it means you have to get there.
Yeah. No, of course. We are running an accelerator program in Monterey, Mexico.
Okay.
Which is 2 hours from the border. So, well, of course, our idea is to send the startups to here, to Austin, or maybe to San Francisco. We already sent startups to Mexican startups to other places. So, Mexico. And obviously.
All right, guys, we're gonna start up for the next Fireside chat. Maybe you can hear me. Phone's over here. You guys want to tie your conversations or take them out to the office hours? That'd be great. If you're going to be in here for the Fireside chat, if you can come forward, that'd be great. We want to make this nice and intimate and cozy. You guys ready?
That's kind of you guys to actually listen to the request. So. We've got fire.
Yeah. And we have Fireball.
Note the
So
crackle
there's also Fireball.
and the music notes will move up here.
All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. Make sure to introduce yourselves.
Would you like to do that?
Sure. Thanks all for staying through the end of the session. My name is Katie McMahon. I'm one of the executives at SoundHound Inc., the company that is behind this revolutionary voice interface platform called Houndify. So I'll talk about us as a company, also the product that we just launched, which is wholly powered by the platform. That product is called Hound, which is a new voice search and assistant experience that is truly revolutionary, and it's really going to blow your mind when I drill into it. But let me pass it over to you first, Jonathan.
Well, no, I mean, I would love to hear more. We're sort of continuing.
Do you have the mics?
But, yeah, this is not on.
Yeah. You don't have to use them. I'm just providing feedback.
Yeah, you can put it down.
You're great. I think. Go for it.
So sort of continuing this theme of apps
Yeah.
living in silos, on that
Yeah.
grid of app icons, branching out into much broader experiences.
Yeah.
I think that is, if I'm not mistaken, really one of the stories of.
Absolutely. So while I've been listening to your chat with Chris and then Marissa, this theme of our brains operating inside of the icon world for each service, and now where are we headed with that? And I want to get out right ahead of that and say we're cognizant of the future of a touchless, screenless future. So let's actually leapfrog just this beloved thing in our hand called the mobile device, which is fundamentally now touch, type, and swipe, to the world where we're just speaking to that light, to that table, to the door, and that isn't going to have a whole host of icons on it, let alone necessarily a thing that you touch. So for the world of interfaces to the IoT in essence, we really believe that voice is going to be the paradigm shift to enable you to operate your world seamlessly. So in order to make a future, much like we all grew up watching the Star Wars or Star Trek, and they didn't talk in a prefab, keyword-based phraseology of, okay, now, control room, start the engine now. In a certain way, they probably walk in and be like, quick, start the engine, let the star fighters out, and you're speaking naturally. What's happened in the last 5 years and the introduction of this toe in the water of the voice assistants that are well known and that we use, they've had to be built on existing technology of voice to text, but then layering on the NLP, the natural language processing, the understanding component. And these two, in essence, below the lid are sciences. These sciences are inherently different and they're complicated. To productize on top of, in essence, two black boxes, it becomes challenging when the interdependency for a correct experience can fall over. If the voice recognition component has an error, that error will onward propagate, and then you're just off the rails altogether. What we've done a lot of things, actually. We've taken 9 years to build this technology. You know us as a company, SoundHound, the wonderful music search, discovery, and play app that has 300 million users. Like, that's an amazing experience in the music domain. All the while, behind the scenes in our stealth lab, our scientists and our engineers have been working on cracking the next frontier for voice. And we knew that in order to not just be better than the existing, right? You can't just be a little better than Siri. We have to be a step change better. To do that, we had to design something that was going to be able to allow us to innovate very fast, own it end to end. So we're the only company, a privately held company, that has all of this stuff under the hood. That includes a voice recognition engine of sorts. But what we've done differently is we've merged just the voice recognition and the NLP side and created it as one engine. We call that speech to meaning. So what happens in using our technology, we're able not only to just do transcription. If all you want is transcription, we could provide that for you. Our platform is open. You can use just that little module, that little domain, and suddenly you've got unbelievably fast transcription in your service or your product or your app. But the real joy factor here is that when you utilize all of our other domains of understanding, you suddenly have the power of voice to meaning, the speech to meaning technology, and end user experience is speed and accuracy. But there are several other components. The other compelling thing is you can follow up. You can keep drilling down. And in this, and I should show some examples to make it really real. It's a small enough crowd. We can lean forward and I'll show you the use case of Uber, the use case of how we've integrated Yelp's data. I can literally open up Hound and ask Hound, show me restaurants nearby that are open after 8 p.m. on a Sunday with outdoor seating are kid-friendly and have parking. Boop! I get exactly what I've asked for. Forevermore, I am never gonna go type and drill down and tick and filter. Hotel search, for example, has also been transformed, but this is another example where a company has given us their golden asset. So Expedia saw what we were doing and thought, this is impressive. And we really respect that sciences like this take a decade to build. Being able to have a platform where we can take your data set and within days, weeks, or months, turn it into an extraordinary hands-free experience. With hotel search, we can now say, okay, Hound, show me hotels in Austin with availability tomorrow night that are less than $400, have a gym and free Wi-Fi. You know, today that's probably like one that might hit that criteria. I might have to move. And that's the joy. When Hound comes back and says, here are the 3 hotels, I might get a little more picky and say, show me only those with a 4-star rating. Or actually, show me those that include a pool or are pet friendly. So you can follow on and continue to drill in. The most beautiful thing in some ways too, when I just think about the context we're in here with talking about the Uber API, I can ask for, show me the nearest coffee shop. Let's say I don't want to go to a chain because I'm in Austin and there could be some really cool home-brewed coffee shops. So show me coffee shops open right now that have outdoor seating except Starbucks. Whoop, and we'll show you. Exclusion is non-trivial on understanding, okay? So I want to just drip that out there. Like, to be able to handle exclusion is profound. If you asked Siri today, show me Chinese restaurants in a keyword spotting way. Restaurant, Chinese, oh, you must want Chinese, but actually that's not what I want. And then I can say, I need an Uber for the first place, that first coffee shop, hands-free, and the Uber comes up and tells me I'm on my way.
Well, what's, you know, to me, AI and NLP have always sort of been these things which have always sort of been like just around the corner,
yeah.
Right? You know, this was actually, as when I was starting out as an analyst, I was showing one of the partners some NLP and AI stuff, and his feedback to me was, you know, we've been looking at, you know, we're just 2 years away from this, you know, sort of explosion for however many, 10, 20 years. Is there something that's actually changed? And if so, what is it that you're able to do this so accurately?
Has something changed that allows us to do this so accurately?
Meaning, at some point we are going to turn, a corner, and why now
right.
are we maybe turning a corner?
You know, and what I'm pausing on is, I'm reflecting on the fact that it has taken us 10 years to build it. So I don't want to trivialize that actually it's just ready out of the box today. Like, it's actually to give honor to a core engineering founding team of our company who started the company with this vision, right? This is back in 2003, 2004, mulling around the thoughts of, well, one day we'll talk to our computers, right? Today this sounds very obvious. But 10 years ago, when we had Kayvon, our founder out there, and our original, and still with us, core team, pitching that was a little far out, right?
Mm-hmm.
To a near-term team, it's like, okay, fine, but show me a business within 3 to 5 years, to which we readily we were able to do through our music business, because in that case we take sound playing around us, we capture that sound and we turn it into meaning. You can buy the song, you can add it to your Spotify playlist, you can stream it, you can launch a Pandora stage, all that richness, and we built a business with SoundHound, the music product. But all the while, we've been funding, in essence, our stealth lab, where our deep thinkers have been cracking away. And this is a labor of love. So often in this world of startups, you know, the fast and furious, iterate fast, fail fast. Do you know, it falls trite into our ears, because to make something truly profound, you actually have to bust gut for years, and you have to work really hard, and you have to fail a lot internally to be able to have that step change of just, you know, a percentage factor accuracy change, and having to do that over cycles and cycles.
Has this been sort of like a separate thread from the music business? Like, is it like a lab that's been operating independently, or has the data that you've gathered from users,
right, good
from the SoundHound app informed what you've been able to do on the sort of the voice assistant
Not
side?
informed in the sense of acoustic modeling or language modeling per se.
Okay.
It has absolutely informed our abilities as a company in understanding the important things of productization. How do you create an experience that's incredibly compelling? How do you add new features that the marketplace wants? How do you listen to what your user data is telling you? How do you build a business and generate revenue that then you can fund in and really hire new talent to keep what's currently in the background getting funded and
Right.
built up. We did just launch, so it was only a matter of March 1st, we launched Hound, the app, and the platform, we opened it in December. So the Houndify platform is now open. Anyone can go in and start playing with it. It's platform agnostic, which is also this beautiful moment. You don't have to wait around and just be like, okay, will I resource it on Android, or will I wait for an iOS solution to appear? We're enabling developers, and that's the fundamental difference here. Companies don't need to have scientists to go in and understand NLP or even voice recognition. What they're able to do is instantly it's very, in many ways, what we've created is so seamless for other companies to pop open a voice entry point. And much of what was said, what I really enjoyed about what Marissa said is, our core business, we're not trying to be somebody else's business, and nor are we. We're never going to be a hotel booking company directly. There are companies out there that do extraordinary work there. We don't want to be a transport and logistics company. There's already this extraordinary company focused on that. So it's almost this triumvirate. How do we all work together in order to enable this world that's seamless, such that we don't, because Chris, as you're talking about the cognitive load, can we all just take a breath, look up, and that's what's on a user level so joyful, that I can just now hound for my Uber and just say, as I did this morning, and I'm staying a little outside of town with family, and I Uber in, right, and I'm running late, so okay, hound, where's the nearest Uber? Oh, it's only 5 minutes away. Okay, that's fine, and then it walks me right through, and I've booked.
And so I'm interested in sort of where the Hound platform?
Right, so
Houndify or
Houndify is the
Houndify,
platform. So we envision a world that's Houndified.
Let's say, Hound, the app,
Mhm.
you guys actually need to work with the data set. I guess companies, as you sort of suggested earlier, they give you what is a very valuable data set, so you could provide answers to their questions. Is that?
Correct. So what I think you're going there is what's underneath the hood of components or data sets, which we call domains. And in some of that, it works really well to partner with leaders in the field, whether it's Yelp, Uber, Expedia, Ignite for stop prices, etc. And then there are other sources that we can get data from, or for example, in music, you can also hound by saying, what's that song? And we initiate our listening technology to tell you the name of the song.
Right.
So there are many ways in which we supply our deep experiences, and by deep, I'm talking about even unit conversion. How many calories are on 3 eggs and bacon? I could just say it like that, whoop, and it works. How cool is that? And then I might be cooking, so I might want to jump into a unit conversion of how many ounces are in a pound, whoop, and you've got it.
Right.
Does it make that sound?
I know, am I doing that? I'm sorry. I'm like,
And so on the other side, you have a developer platform.
Yeah.
Is that strictly for enabling my service to be
Houndified.
consumed within the Hound app?
Great,
Or
okay,
is it also
great.
that I can present a voice interface to my users?
Exactly. Great. Twofold.
Double great.
It's
Triple. Yeah. Okay.
yes. I was going to use the word tremendous, but I think I'm hearing that way too much.
Yeah, no,
in
that's
the
too
national,
much. Yeah,
forum, so let's not use that word choice. The value proposition for a developer to come onto the platform can be just for what they want. If they simply want a voice interface for their app or their car dashboard or their connected home, they're able to leverage that technology and bring that to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
In some partnerships who want to actually leverage the proposition, for example, in-car dashboard, would you, company X, maybe a music streaming service, would you enjoy having the ability to be able to be plug and play for all the car manufacturers that will have houndified dashboards?
Mhm.
So it in fact allows those partners to have an amplified distribution reach because you're included inside the platform.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, you have sort of a developer ecosystem sort of network effect there.
Exactly.
Where the more developers you have, the more services you can provide.
Exactly,
to-
and then if it makes sense, we certainly want to pop it open inside of our B2C product in Hound,
Right.
so that, you know, it comes to life there.
Okay. One of the things that's sort of interesting is that we've had like 30 years of this like tech startup incumbent disruption ecosystem, right? You know, you had Microsoft, and then they had this big hole in their, in their system that they looked like a toy, and they didn't acknowledge how important it was, right? And then you had this, this really expensive iPhone that people didn't sort of recognize how important that was going to be. Like, it looked like this luxury product, and it turned out to be a toy computer. And one of the things that's sort of interesting is that now that we've actually been doing this for a long time, it's almost like you could say that Zuckerberg has seen what happened to Bill Gates, right? And he can see what happened to Microsoft, and can say, I don't want that to happen to me, which sort of explains these masterful acquisitions of WhatsApp and Instagram and things like that. But it may be, if you look at if you ask the average person who's going to own voice, now historically a change in user interface usually means start this whole incumbent disruption cycle again, right? You have keyboard and mouse, that was Microsoft.
Right.
Touch, that was Apple,
Right.
So if voice is going to be sort of the next platform,
Yeah.
do we follow the pattern of history, or are we at some sort of like second order where all of the incumbents, they are aware of disruption? They're like trained in the art of disruption, therefore they can sort of preempt it. And I know I'm asking sort of like a challenging, skeptical question, but I wonder how you guys think about how do you live and thrive sort of in that world?
Yeah, I think there are a few components there that you're really getting to. Let's look at Apple, Google, and Facebook, and if you pare it down to one word in that ordering, you have hardware, tech, and platform. And that's pretty interesting, isn't it? And to your point of where I think Mark Zuckerberg's vision or credit for seeing how valuable platform plays are is something that we're aware of, and in many ways thought deeply on how do we enable a technology that we foresee as being ubiquitous to be able to get up that curve, and the convergence of what's happened being that data is now in the palm of our hands, the connected world, the IoT tsunami is about to hit, and the user behavior of actually this stuff, like the air out of my lungs to this. 5 years ago, you didn't see it. Today, 57% of a teen uses voice in front of friends, not just like alone here and there. And then all across the demographic spectrum, you're seeing how now it's just becoming a utility. But what I love here is we're still at this friction point, and this is herein lies really the opportunity why we're so excited with Houndify and our whole vision. Really, people still feel ready to be pissed off. The minute either you're an early adopter apologist, and we've all figured out how to optimize for the two services, even with amazing connected speaker that's beginning. I go in for a joy factor in my kitchen, and I say, now the two use cases that I know rock my world, and I'm sticky with them, but I haven't decided to learn all these skills that I need to then tack on new phrases because cognitive load. Like it's not valuable enough to me to spend my precious resource to be taught how to say something. So what we've done in one fell swoop that took 10 years is looking at the two buckets of people who have frustration points. One, that early adopter. How do I say this? I'm ready to learn. But actually, we spin the paradigm. You just speak naturally, just like you'd say to a friend. Do you know any cafes that are open at 8 p.m. on a Sunday that have free Wi-Fi and outdoor seating? That's joy factor. So I'm actually going to take that user behavior because it's now so profoundly better inside of Hound, and I'm not going to use my native options. I'm actually going to bother to open up and say, okay, Hound, show me, getting really specific, total joy factor. So that's the early adopter crowd. Then there's the whole set, and we're all still included in this set, that look down, touch, type, swipe, swipe, filter, filter, swipe, swipe. Like our whole life, and we feel it, and this is why the data is out on TextNet and the chiropractic. Like if you want to future-proof your life, tell everyone to just go into like chiropractics. I think that's going to be the most bulletproof of all industries, because all of our bodies are really feeling this 60-pound extra load when your head is in this position. How much you just literally look up and even get what you need faster. So we're actually taking the user behavior away from the type swipe. You don't need to Google for stuff. Just speak Hound, you get it, and suddenly you move through your life more seamlessly and joyfully.
Right. No, it's really an amazing thing. I mean, I think one of the ways, you know, that we're looking at, we look at AI, you know, is that, you know, I'm grouping in NLP and voice recognition in AI. Is that, you know, like sort of until now we've kind of lived in a world where the atomic unit was like, let's say, a photo or a blob of text or just a blob of audio, right? And that was sort of the atomic unit of sort of the internet was like the post, right? Like I posted a blob in a messenger, or I posted a photo, and it's the post, which is, and maybe a little bit of metadata about it. But what changes with AI and things like you know, SoundHound and Houndify is that the atomic unit actually, it's almost as if we've like gone from discovering atoms to discovering subatomic particles. We like now
show you something.
yeah. So now it's not just an audio clip. It is the actual words in the audio clip, which are, you know, which is the data. And I think one of the things that's really sort of exciting is it might just massively expand the data set, you know, and same with photos. Now we have things like Clarify and Google Photos. You can actually, it's the object inside the photo.
Right, I love what you're talking about, and I love the use of the word blob because it, in many ways. But what you made me think through and in sharing more is that complex and compound criteria, like a lot of stuff, to be able to handle that on an AI or an understanding level is again really complicated. So if you imagined putting in, and I'm going to make a really crazy long one just as an example. You probably wouldn't sit there and type all of this stuff in, but you want all this information, but it's discretized in different ways. So there are going to be like a lot of blobs. So humor me, so I've just opened up Hound, and I'll just do a really crazy example of.
What's that? Oh yeah. Okay.
That's the odd.
Yeah. What is the population of Japan and China, and what is the area code of Ireland? What languages are spoken in India, and what is the capital of Bermuda?
Real? It's not working.
Is it on? Just try it.
Testing. You can.
It's working. I don't know.
I think that's me.
No.
Hello.
No. The other one.
There's no red light on. Hello.
What time is it?
It is 2:26 p.m. in Austin.
I can hear that. Sure.
How about in Tokyo?
It is 5:26 a.m. the next day in Tokyo.
What is the population in Japan and China, and what is the area code of Germany, and what languages are spoken in India, and what is the capital of Aruba?
The population is 127,288,000 for Japan and 1,330,044,000 for China. The area code of Germany is 49.
Instantly. So the transcription came up instantly.
Empty.
All of that.
Others listed. The capital of Aruba is.
What's the market cap of Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook?
There was a sound.
The market cap is $566.98 billion for Apple, $499.58 billion for Alphabet, $420.58 billion for Microsoft, and $311.27 billion for
Let's do
Facebook.
this shout out for Uber here in some senses. So, show me coffee shops nearby that have outdoor seating and are open after 8 p.m. tonight.
Here are several coffee shops that are open after 8 p.m. on Saturdays that have outdoor seating.
Great.
That's amazing.
I need an Uber to the first one.
Sure, an UberX can take you from here to Halcyon located at 218 West 4th
Airport Street in Austin in 4 minutes for about $5 to $6. Do you want to book it?
No, thank you. Cancel.
The Uber request has been canceled.
How did we get onto that? There was a springboard of complex. That's what, I'm sorry, just to make sure I'm being clear for the developers here.
Yeah, that was sort of like a mic dropping demo. You don't necessarily need to finish that point.
Sorry, thank you. But I'm just kind of like, we've got developers here who are like, okay, great, but like, what do I get to play with? Like, and how amazing is it? You know, the complex criteria and to be able to handle just what I showed you in the fluidity, you can do that now,
Right.
and you don't need to be the scientist. We've had recent graduates who just came out of university with a CS degree spend 1 week and they've built kind of meaningful domains, including games. You say, okay, I want to play game. You want to play blackjack? Guess my number, hangman?
Yeah.
And suddenly you do this in the car on a road trip, and it's just joy unlocking.
That's great. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I just
Yes.
have one question. So, one thing is realizing what you do want from the system.
Mhm.
The other thing is that the noise pollution around you. So I just want to know, like, how is it solving that problem?
Great.
Because I know Google Glass, they turn into the voice vibration that you're getting from your skull rather than just the
Interesting.
microphone.
Well, great. I think you're really touching on how do we handle ambient noises and deal with clutter of sound. And you'd asked what other parts of our business have we taken learnings from in some ways. And I can point to SoundHound in terms of music recognition. In our years of expertise, we've had to handle situations in which we're receiving a wave format. Like we're taking that listen sample, we unpack it, and we have to know instantly, is that the latte machine in the background, or is that somebody singing or humming, or is that, you know, some EDM melody happening? And then what do we do with that? Do we go and throw it against database A or B, et cetera? So that friction point of taking away clutter noise, if you will, and being able to process the real stuff that we want to get at is something that is part of our area of expertise and what we know how to handle, and which you benefit from on the platform level. That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, I guess building on that question, like this idea of attenuation or the ability to tune into specific sounds is
Yeah.
something that you don't, like if you think about what SoundHound does when it's like doing music recognition,
Yeah.
of course it's leaving all those other things out. But
Right.
are there ways, or is what you're saying that you take this waveform and to Jonathan's point about the blog,
Mhm.
moving into the world where you can actually identify all the things in it, can you actually like decompose a wave format into all these sort of object generating sounds being generated by objects and then identify those objects? Like, can you actually get
Yeah.
to like the make and model of like the car that drove by and the, you know, coffee machine or whatever that's going off at the same time?
Yeah.
Because right now we think of just about music as being like the obvious application.
Right. And for think of Hound as voice in. I'm intentional. I know what I want, or maybe I don't know everything. Right? Like, what's the mortgage on $1 million house?
What is the down payment?
20%.
Okay, using a down payment of 20%. What is the mortgage period?
30 years.
Okay, using a mortgage period of 30 years. What is the interest rate?
4%.
Okay, using an interest rate of 4%. Your monthly mortgage payment is
Now watch this.
$3,819.32.
How about for a $5 million house?
Okay, using a home value of $5 million.
Context aware.
Your monthly
It
mortgage
kept
payment
that,
is
flipped it.
$19,096.61.
But in the beginning, like, I didn't know how to use a mortgage calculator, so I needed to be coached through it. If you're buying a house, you're probably going to do this like 100 times a day. Then you become a power user and you throw in all those. You know, same for like, you know, flight status. Yesterday, like flying in, you can just say, it'll coach you through, like which airline, what airport, these sort of things. So in these examples, we know that the voice is the input, but in other examples where there's sound or music, we can also handle like a sing hum. What's this song?
Listening.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay, total rubbish voice, and I'll be really embarrassed when it comes back with sorry.
Sounds like smoke on the water.
How badass is that? And in one stroke, like, Totally. But I share that just because I didn't give it a phonetic understanding, did I?
Mine is blown.
Like, what I just did was, but guys, like Google doesn't even do this. I took gobbledygook from my brain. I couldn't articulate. I didn't have the name of the artist. I didn't know the title. I didn't even know a fragment of a lyric. I just knew gobbledygook. And we transformed that sound into something not only actionable or an answer, like I can be hearing it, joy factor. So, but I want to be very clear, like in that sound put, this one I said, well, what's that song? And in the back end, we go, okay, that's going to be SoundHound mode. And in that, is that recorded music or is that sing hum? Because again, on the database level and the processing level, they're separate paths. Have I been clear on answering that question?
Yeah.
With
I mean,
examples?
also, I mean, maybe can you speak to just like coaching? Your sort of AI bot service I found.
Please may I have a rum and coke delivered to me instantly? Well, I'm gonna appear.
Be a fireball. Anyways, I guess in terms of like coaching the user, right? Like one of the questions, the thing about the mortgage thing is great, but what if I'm like, I don't even know how to like think about, you know, what the term is. Like the language isn't clear to me. So are you able to get deeper? Because one of the things that's problematic about just apps, learning apps, using apps, learning services, is that the language may actually be foreign to the user. So how, in terms of a developer platform, how can this platform actually unlock and enable people to train users to be better users of the products?
I love it. Like, on the most literal example there, like, what's the definition of a mortgage? Like,
Definition of mortgage: a conditional conveyance of property as security for the repayment of a loan.
Great, fantastic. But what you want to do is really unlock maybe an experience or an app's understanding. What is special sauce word mean? And that's the joy factor for the dev platform. Ultimately, when we enable the customized domain, that's when you're able to go in and actually bring to life those use cases and experiences.
Yeah, actually I was thinking a lot about the education because when you talk to Google search, right, you have to you change the way you speak for that. And I almost feel like with Amazon's Alexa, I don't even know how to say things to her because I don't know what she's expecting. So I feel like I always pause and I have this hard time formulating my sentences. And it's like you guys are reversing that and just being speak like a normal human being, which is you almost have to reverse train out those behaviors. But was just curious too about the education over the lifespan, as you guys add more services or maybe there was something that didn't work. How do you think about correcting things and being hey, by the way, 6 weeks ago I didn't understand that, but now I do, or now we have all these things.
Yeah, thank you, because it is exactly, we've got so much we want to really houndify under the hood. And in this example right now, Hound, first version live, we don't have a deep, joyful results for recipes. And we so want to do that, but you know what, it didn't prioritize over Uber, for example. So, we're focusing on really big, important use cases that make it super sacred. But one day, or maybe Epicurean will come and houndify their stuff and pop it inside of their app and also inside of Hound, so that I could just say, show me tomato soup recipes that include mint and basil. I can just speak normally like that and you get your answer. So joyful. So when it comes time for richer sets to come out, and Hound and the platform is constantly getting smarter. It's constantly evolving. Again, this is where the ability to scale quickly is wonderful. When Siri came out, it had 5 domains, right? And 5 years later, it only was able to add another, was it 10 or so? That speaks to the rigidity of the architecture. Again, maybe licensing some stuff that you as a huge corporation don't even own. Then this new stuff that you've got to integrate, but then how do you innovate all together? No matter how much resource, I think we talked about it, the resources or the manpower that you have at your disposal, in this field, it might not necessarily be the top gorilla wins the day, because look at, you didn't know our company before you walked in here. You don't know our names, and that's okay, because actually it's sort of nice just to be hunkered down, building something without the distractions of, ooh, look at the competition, or clamor attention to us when we're not ready to really show the world. And now it's time to show the world, and we waited this long so that we can accelerate, and the platform gets so much smarter. We announced this back in June in a beta program. We had about 50 rich domains live inside of Hound. We went live March 1st with 100. So that acceleration of how much richer and faster the deep verticals. And in the meantime, for the things that we don't catch. So show me, and I use this for like months with it. Show me chocolate chip cookie recipes. I say it into Hound. We give back web results, and that's kind of just fine. I tap on the one, and I'm there, and I've got my web results. And for that bucket of users I talked about that are the touch and tappers, especially a demographic who you see, like your parents who are dictating their text messages, the same thing for their web searches. Now just say your whole long thing. Like when you have a bite here, it looks like a tick bite, and you're like, oh God, you're normally going to be like, ooh, rash on the arm, tick bite, Lyme disease. You know, and you're talking fragmentedly, just Hound and say,
Now you can just
please
scream.
show me images. Show me images, Hound, of, you know, tick, Lyme disease tick bite, and we'll show you pictures right away of, you know, it's cuter when we say, okay, Hound, show me pictures of mama giraffe kissing baby giraffe, and instantly these cute pictures pop up. So
I really want the recipe service too, because that's, I'm always like, the recipe apps are the worst thing for keeping my phone clean, because I'm always, my hands are always
You
like
got
covered in
flour,
flour and
totally.
yeah, and like
Right.
oil or something. I'm trying to
Yeah.
look at step 2. I just want to be like,
that's right.
what is step 3? You know,
Great.
put the chicken in the oven. I don't know. Well, one more question.
One more question. So you build this library, this huge library for 9 years, probably you work a lot on it. How do you want to expand globally? Like how do you want to hit China, which
Yeah.
is like different languages or like
Yeah, no, you're right. So on the language understanding front, we've started obviously in the US market with English. We're rapidly expanding on the language side of things. Our next set of languages will get announced soon. But on the services for Hound in particular, to go live, let's say in China like you asked, or even in the UK, we want to make sure some of these rich, stickiest, like the local examples, and this might be why we need to integrate with Foursquare sooner, to have that experience take some of the time on building it up, right? So it's not instantly that we turn this on around the world. We could have, but we didn't want to disappoint users who are trying to find their local search here and get disappointed by it. But it's absolutely built, and it's only a matter of the time and resource behind that concentrated effort. Your question? Is that it? I could take it offline.
You know, why don't we continue right afterwards? We're gonna have office hours here right afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
So, thank you guys. That was amazing. That was a great demo. So I think we've hit the rapid fire thing. Anyways, ending now. I think that where we're at with this is like we're gonna switch to just sort of a more like casual kind of like conversation. I don't know that there's anyone over in office hours. Is that right? Yeah. So I think like we're here to just like chill out, have just general conversations or whatever amongst ourselves. This more or less this is a strange conclusion to like this whole thing. But what I'm trying to say is we should like drink some Fireball, and this part is actually over. We did have a scheduled special guest who just emailed me and said he's not coming, so that's also why this is actually a great way of wrapping it up and closing. But you guys were amazing. This is awesome. Thank you, Jonathan,
Thank you for hosting.
for your help. Thank you guys for coming. We have space until like 3:34 or whatever, so you guys want to chill out, try to finish off the rest of the chips or something. I don't know. There should be a beer. Nice work, guys. But we have Fireball, so. Anyways, thanks you guys so much for coming.
What is
And,
Fireball?
if you guys want to get in touch with me, my email is just messina@uber.com. Thanks.
Brilliant, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, well, it was fun just to be with a small group. Great, and for people to really get it. So, thank you so much for being with me.
Sure.
Amazing partner.
Yeah.
One was called What Not People Are Doing Uber, and one example was a woman saying her father who was a very Indian accent. She couldn't believe that she was actually understood, but he, in her words, was Uber. She was disappointed in her, and then she put this in front of him, and he instantly got it, and ordered what she wanted. And it opened up the world, and he just couldn't, you know, she was like, I wanted to figure out, it's just another one of those, and I was like, put on it, and I'm like, oh God, thank God for your father.
I was going to ask you about that, the accent thing.
Understanding.
Is that really hard? It's got to be hard to.
It is.
How does that even work?
Yeah, I mean, there are complexities under the hood, right? There's a lot of understanding. And the more we had users instead of traditional, but would
Yes.
do well, a stretch of different.
Yes.
So first of all, I want to like introduce you to
Commercial real estate.
if you need any advice or like because we are always on the stage so
Where you from?
I'm from Iran, but I'm leaving Dallas.
Okay.
So you shop online.
Yes.
So when you shop online, the major problem is
I downloaded the app.
the return. In terms of the seller, the major problem of the online shopping is the high.
Sounds like it's pretty high now.
10%.
As examples
And
that you were
then
throwing.
70% of that is because of the market.
Yeah. It's so quick too.
And the other 30% is 10% they just buy it and they return it, 20% is the color matching and this is so what we do is that we solve this problem and we create a platform which we call it a social commerce integrated image processing technology. So what we do is that we enter a website and then upload two pictures from front and side. From that picture and we interact with the user, in less than 1 minute we get all of your body important body. Then you're entering a market which is based on your size. Keep this in mind. From the other end of the platform, we have individual designers that they can upload, they can create a profile, they can upload their items and with the measurements, right? So when we have the measurement of the user, we have the measurement of the product, we're going to do a comparison. In the back end, and then we are showing the fitness graph. So when you're trying to buy a share, they're going to tell you that okay, this shoulder is a little bit tighter than your body size, or this shoulder is looser. So we're not going to decide what to wear, we're just going to show it. It's like we call it a fitting. So it's not good, actually.
It's like
All this has went for last year. Beside this, also, we are trying to. One of the biggest for me is like the online shopping is that we don't get the opinion of the person for importance.
So, I joined a startup.
On this, for example, when women goes to mall or men go to mall, they can bring a friend, they can ask a question, like they can check. So what we do is that we integrate this e-commerce with a social aspect of it. So they can help the regulation is finding through. So what we do is that we let you put a shirt with quality of the shoes, and then you can share it with your friends. Your friends can comment on it. Your friends can rate it 1 to 5, and then you can upload the result and then you can buy it.
You realize it's a regulated industry?
The design says that you're following or they work with your friends, and then you get a feed. It's like a feed from Facebook, but it's just basically just only flashing things. So you get a feed, and then even you can buy stuff from that. So we have said about the company's Rachel, so you're watching the video, they already YouTube, you're watching the video, and then you can easily buy that. So we are doing the same thing. Instead of a video, you're seeing what your friends wants to share, or you're following a really good site or a design.
It's a very
So all of this we are already integrated, and we come up with a prototype. But it's not complete prototype because the web design is not finished as it reaches like the end of the budget. So what I'm asking is that I can share with you a video of the prototype if you're interested to look at it. I just want to give you insight on what we should keep next. We are right now we're looking for a seed investment to getting some part of the platform enhanced and then someone did that. Ready for a dog?
We have to call them next day.
Yeah.
You sure?
You're gonna have a really great start problem. Meaning basically you're building a network, right? You're building something that would be a network, but you won't have users, and therefore, you know, how is it useful? Like if I'm the first user, it's still not useful. It only works when my friends are on there, or other people are on there.
I mean, you don't have the problem of the sizing.
So, yeah, I'm trying to like.
Right,
That
so
problem is solved.
my advice would be pick one of the two and do that, and you build, like, chances are you build, I would do the side moving first. It's like I would do, but like that tells me building networks today are really hard. People have built a lot of, hey, what should I wear, what should I buy, shopping, social experiences, and they haven't really panned out. But maybe the answer to that is that you use sort of the utility of the fitting technology, be sort of like a wedge. Maybe you can get designers and retailers to use that, and then you can use that wedge to build a network on top of it. I think like that's sort of a
and that's always good.
Chris Dixon has this saying, it's like come for the tool, stay for the network. Usually the tool or the utility is kind of leading the way. So I would kind of say along those lines.
The reason for Apple platform is that it's like we are adding like we have one more aspect which is not trying to implement it. So it's just developed which we are trying to investors look at the data so we can say that investors
That's all the whole other level. It's like really complicated.
but for what we're going to be offering is the designers, so we are bringing down the prices of and then you're adding this toolbar, but and then at the same time you're adding the phone toolbar and the sizing. But what you're saying is that we should forget about the social part now and then just
Yeah, and also in terms of if you want, speaking to investors, it's like presenting too big of an idea can be actually a hindrance, can be like a negative. If it's too big of an idea, because it sounds almost unmanageable. How do you like building networks today is just really hard. I mean, you don't really see that many new networks anymore. And I would just maybe think about presenting it more as